So we're starting the second class in Faith and Confidence. And for some of you, it's revisiting it after 5 years or 6 years. Some of you, it's learning something that we didn't even learn when we studied it 3 years ago or something like that. There's 8 chapters altogether, so I just want to put some perspective that when I taught this 6 years ago, and what's on the Torah Nefesh website is basically just the first through chapters 1, 2, 3, and a little bit of 4. And then the second time we taught it, it was based mostly on chapter 8. So we never got a chance to really cover everything. And the most important thing that happened as far as my own learning of this piece is that 2 years ago, Rav Yitzchak started teaching it to the girls at the high school. And obviously he thinks that it's a waste of time to teach it to the boys, but I don't know why. I'm just kidding, I have no idea. So it's probably fitting for us to redo this. And since he's been teaching it since last year, so I have been teaching it in Torah Nefesh for the men. And it's really been powerful, much better than I think the 2 previous times that I tried to teach this. So I think we all have a lot to gain from it. Since we taught it in Torah Nefesh in English, I've come to the conclusion that this is what's called Jewish coaching. So I don't think I said that last week. That this is well, I did say it in a lot of words. As I said that this is empowerment, and it's how to empower a person in the proper way. In a sense, somebody picked up very strongly, without or ignoring to a large extent their past, and people are really stuck in the past, and it's very hard to really empower somebody when they're stuck there, and they think they need to solve the past. They need to somehow set it right, or find some kind of conclusion to it, and so on. I think one of the things you look at in life is you see that Hashem runs the world pretty much like what it looks like. Nothing's really completed. I don't know if you get this feeling at the end of the day, or at the end of the year, or at the end of a decade, or whatever it is. I haven't really finished anything. And to sort of move on from one thing to the next, and nothing's completely finished. So that actually fits very well with also the way we learn Torah, which is that it's always open-ended. We open up the issue and we go as far as we can, but I don't think anybody ever has a sense. When I was younger, I thought that that's what the Gdolim had, that they had a sense of knowing the whole sugya back and forth. And the truth is that the more you go into something, the more questions you have. So you never really feel this is closed-ended and I've figured it out. It's always being reinterpreted. It's always being so it's sort of like, I think the cathartic moment for me was when I heard from Rav Yitzchak once many years ago that the Arizal, the way he taught, was everything was introductions. Every single chapter in his books, and for instance, Shara Gilgulim, it's the most apparent. Each chapter is called an Akadama. It's an introduction. And from the introduction you can write many books after that. And he didn't stop because he only did the introduction and hadn't finished the body of the work. He continued, and there's another introduction, another one, so on. And that's sort of something that occurs in life very strongly. And so we started with the most important thing being to learn how to vacate the mind and the psyche from all the thoughts, all the various machinations that a person has in his mind, and to be able to start with a fresh slate every time. And the fresh slate is not empty. It's not like haborek en bomayim. The well is empty, but it's not empty of Hashem. And that was basically the class that's what we talked about last time. And we said that to understand this in the proper way, you really have to first of all relate to a tzaddik. Try to think about a relationship with the tzaddik in order to understand this in relation to Hashem. That to have faith in Hashem means that regardless of what my own plans are and how I think I want to achieve and see the future, Hashem is here, and I can rely on Him to be able to take a step back and to empty myself from all my various pursuits and all my thoughts about how I'm going to achieve what I want in the future. So empowerment really begins with, first of all, submission in a certain sense to Hashem. That however it turns out, it's okay. And somebody asked on the website if when Avraham believed in Hashem, it says Ve'emin b'Hashem v'chshaveh lo tzedakah. We talked a little bit about that last week. That when Avraham believed in Hashem, whether that also meant that whether he had vacated his mind from his thoughts about having children that would create a nation, meaning that maybe the nation would be formed in some other way, or whether he was willing to completely empty his mind even of the thought of having a nation. Maybe a nation is not needed in order to bring Hashem into the world, to bring consciousness of Hashem into the world. So I said, as far as I understand, it goes all the way as far back as you can go. I mean, it also included the thoughts that he had that he needed to create a nation, even though that was like his birth name, Avram, which meant, when Hashem called him Avraham, he said, Av Hamun Goyim, he'll be the father of many nations. So one understanding is, I will be literally the father of many nations. I'll have a nation that will proclaim your name. And suddenly he has to go back even on that. Maybe I didn't understand that fully and completely. And so faith in this sense is willingness to empty myself, to simply go back into a state of a vacuum in terms of my thought. And that's basically what we talked about last week, that to understand this, you really have to see it in relatively, first of all, to a tzaddik, to somebody that you have faith in. And how you're willing, or you should be willing, that if you really have faith in them, to neutralize all the different thoughts that you have about how to attain this goal that you wanted and that you've been given a promise for, or a bracha for, or whatever it is, and to simply trust and have faith that this will happen, regardless of what I see before me, what other plans I had, how I thought it would happen. Just first of all, you have to see it in relation to a person. By the way, it can go up in that direction. It can also go down in the direction of children. You can go up looking at a tzaddik and saying that I have some need to vacate my mind, to empty my mind from all my plans, all the things that I thought would be needed to be done, and just trust in the promise. But the same thing also is in relation to our children, that also a person has to have an ability to empty themselves from all the plans. They had all these plans for you. Look at what are you doing? This doesn't really fit my picture of what I thought you were going to do. A lot of people use their children to validate themselves. The sign that I'm a good person is that my children are in my image, that I was able to form them in the way that I want them. And to be able to let that go and to have faith and confidence, this we'll learn about in chapter 3, what it means to have faith and confidence in another Jew, or in another soul. What does it mean to have faith and confidence there? But it's the same thing. It's what the Baal Shem Tov taught, that a person should have two two types of faith: faith in Hashem and faith in another Jew. And what that means is to let them, I don't know, there was a song like that from Sting, you know? If you love somebody, let them go, or something like that. I don't know, whatever it was. So it's not stam, I'm letting them go. Faith is a faculty. It creates a world. Meaning that when somebody has faith in me and I feel it, then that enables me, that empowers me to become something more than what I maybe thought I could become. And that postponement of me as the father looking at the son, for instance, postponing my plans, my thoughts, my feelings, my whatever I had in mind, is the vacuum necessary to allow the seed to sprout, to whatever, because we have a tremendous impact on the people that are we have authority over, in a certain sense at least. So the moment that we're willing to vacate the space and leave it to them, leave an open arena, so that's very empowering for the person that's underneath us. So this works on many levels, both up and down, both going up the hierarchy and down the hierarchy. Okay. So I hope that, in one sense, sort of captures what we did and maybe puts another spin on it. Okay. So, likewise, I'm in line 5. The power of pure faith in the Almighty purges from the believer's consciousness all thoughts or unconstructive worries. So line 5. If you can see. So that's the power of faith. Where does this all come from? It all comes from how Hashem created the world. Now, we didn't know this. Did we know this? Did we not know this before the Arizal? I don't know. But the Arizal comes and suddenly says, he invents this picture, a geometric picture, or model, for explaining how Hashem creates the world. And he says that at first he has to create an empty space, a vacuum, a halal. So if he's creating an empty space, this implies that there's something there before that he has to empty out. So what is he emptying out? What is Hashem emptying out from this space that is necessary in order to create worlds? So usually we say his presence, but that's not true because he's still present.
Yeah,
so what he's vacating, what he's taking out, is his thoughts. Or you might say he's taking out his plan. He's moving it away. He's saying, I had a plan, what I wanted to do with the world, but I'm putting that on hold right now, to allow the world to begin to develop on its own, as it were. What does this mean? It means that when you try to understand when this all started in your mind, but I'm on purpose being very, very vague. What is this all started? If I try to understand where I came from, how come my mind is the way it is, and I try to put a point on it. This started because whatever this is, my problem, my trauma, whatever it is, because there was some event that happened. Something happened to me. And that's like the way that everybody thinks today. It's like, if I'm screwed up, it must mean that somebody did something to me. It's got to be. Because why would I be this way? It's unfathomable that somehow this is the natural state of things. But one of the things that I think the Baal Shem Tov tried to get across by saying the world is created at every moment is that's not going to lead you very far. It's not going to. Those questions, which in the Arizal are called, what was before? What was before the creation of the world? What was there before? He says, it's not the Arizal, the Gemara already says. In Chagiga, don't ask that question. Because it doesn't lead you, it's not very productive. It's not constructive. It doesn't help. These questions of why am I the way that I am right now are questions that lead you off the main purpose of your life. You don't understand life better by understanding how it got to be this way. Because usually when you're looking for how did it get to be this way, what you're looking for is something to blame. There's somewhere to place the blame in a different place. And you don't have to look at it that way. There's another option. The other option is, and this is what it means, that it's not cause and effect, and to understand. Really, that's what we're trying to escape. We're trying to escape, with faith, we're trying to escape the so common need of the mind to attribute everything to cause and effect. Faith, what it does is, it draws like a line that says, before this, there's simply nothing. Obviously, it's not nothing, but there's no cause that made things the way they are right now in my psyche, in my mind. Don't try to trace it back, because it's too, you know what, even if you would be able to trace it back, it's so complex. Nothing's ever finished. Nothing's ever complete. You'll never really be able to figure it out that way. And so there are two options. You either can spend your life trying to figure out how did this happen? How did I get here? I don't know why this is coming to my mind again, but there was a song in the 80s, Talking Heads. You wake up in the middle of the night and you ask yourself, who am I? Where did I come from? What is all of this? So that's like the confounded version. Because I don't know where that leaves you, but if you exercise faith as something, as a faculty that you have, that you're in control of, so what faith is doing is it's creating a vacuum, which basically, the most important thing about this vacuum is that it's not tied back to something. You're not trying to understand, to unravel, how did all of this become? It is how it is. And in order to create the world from this moment on, I have to be able to purge the situation completely, just completely take it out. It doesn't matter how it happened here. I can ignore it. It doesn't matter at all. The sense of closure that we're looking for by things working out in some way probably doesn't exist in this world. Not in the way that we think of it. It's too complex. I won't be able to fully understand it. It's true, there are moments when you feel that there's closure, but if you force it, if you try to make sure that everything reaches a sense of closure, at some point you have to draw the line. This is as far as it goes, and that's it. This is all I can trace it to. This is the end. This is the end of the line for me, both forwards and backwards. It's the same thing.
And then Shuva also, doesn't it? That it takes you back to a place before creation, before.
Okay. Exactly. How did it come here? Tshuva says, at a very high level, it doesn't really matter how it got to be the way that it is. By connecting back to Hashem, it's like you're resetting the whole reality, the whole state. That's like to say that the world was created at this moment. Because there's no real cause and effect. It's not. Maybe it wasn't created. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. It's a matter of faith. And what the faith is doing is it's allowing me to restart the whole picture, to restart the world, restart my life. And again, the person says, you're destined to run up against walls because you're carrying behind you such a terrible burden, and it's not going anywhere if you just can't will it away. It's not just going to go away. We're not saying that it's going to go away, because at every moment you have to repurge the whole situation. And you know what? Things don't come back all the time. They come back part of the time. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't come back. And if you disconnect the cause and effect train that's driving forward and like a locomotive into a wall, and you keep taking off the cars, eventually it becomes lighter and lighter. It's like, I don't know how I don't know exactly how it got here. Hashem is saying, like, I had all these plans, all these thoughts, and now to create this world, I have to purge everything. All the plans that I had, I set them aside. So the way sages say this is, they say he had many worlds that he created, and none of them found favor in his eyes. This wasn't what I wanted. So I have to put all that behind me. So I tried this, I tried that. It doesn't matter. All those plans, that didn't work out. So maybe the world that I need every time is a world where I don't yet have a plan for. I don't yet know exactly how I want it to turn out. Rather, what am I doing? I'm having faith in the fact that everything is good. And we said that that's the critical ingredient that doesn't appear in the East when they empty their minds. Meaning you don't come up into a place where you can't see beyond that point, everything is good. You just say, I can't see beyond that point, I don't see anything. So I've created an empty space, I've emptied my mind. So where am I now? What's outside of my mind? I've emptied it, so what's on the border?
Whatever you see.
So if I can't see anything, I don't know what's on the outside. But a Jew has, and that's what Jewish faith is, that in the end Hashem is good. So this whole empty space that I've now created, it's sitting in the middle of goodness.
Why would a non-Jew not have the same thing?
Yeah.
Because you need faith.
And if he
No,
does,
why not?
They're just emptying it, not faith. It's
No,
not
I'm
exactly
saying,
the
why
same
can't they
thing.
say
Oh, they
the
could.
same sentence?
They could. They could. Except the difference is that it'll be like just a statement. And what I know about the Jewish soul is that it's connected to the goodness in its essence. And therefore, whatever's outside of it is the goodness. So even the animal soul is that way. Even the animal soul in the Jew comes from the good side of the tree of good and evil. So even in the negative things that I've done because of my animal soul, and negative I don't mean the averos that I've done, but the things that have not been for Hashem, that have been without consciousness of Hashem, but not that I on purpose wanted to do something that's prohibited. Even those things, in the end, when I purge everything and I say, so what is there on the outside of the animal soul? Well, it's sitting in a pool of goodness. So this was all for the best. I don't know how. I don't understand how. I have faith that that's how it is. So this is such an important ingredient before beginning to do anything. Before any pursuit of the future, I have to first of all purge everything that I have. What?
What about that? We say that the beginning is seen in the end. You understand?
Mm-hmm. But that's after we start doing.
That's not okay.
First, there has to be faith, and in the faith, there's no plans. Right. We'll see in a moment. We're so mission oriented that we don't know how to purge. We don't know how to create this vacuum. It's an exercise, and it's a tremendous exercise of being able to connect back to where we started from. And there's a gap. That's the main thing I want to get across, is that it's a gap. I'll show it in a moment geometrically so that you get some idea about it. But when you exercise faith and you're able to create an empty space in which you are, in who you are and everything, it creates a gap between the cause and effect train that you know and how things are right now. It allows you to start anew, to start a new cause and effect train. Yeah.
So this word purge means that not letting our circumstances of the past hold
Right.
us back from moving forward.
Right.
So
Right.
we're not going into the circumstances,
Right.
we're just saying
Right.
that
Exactly.
I believe.
Exactly.
Okay.
Whereas
Whereas,
somebody who doesn't do this, or as we'll see, has a lower meaning of faith, will say simply that the circumstances, that's like the animal soul, will say that the circumstances were necessary or a sign for what I need to do now. But real faith, the higher form of faith, and that Navi will remember that we have two types of faith. One was higher and one was lower when I taught chapter 8. So the higher type of faith, the great faith, which is Abraham versus Noah, was that Avram is able to completely go beyond circumstances. They don't mean anything at all. Whereas Noah, he's stuck in circumstance. In the end, the way that he sees faith is to believe that how things unraveled until this moment is for the best. But when a Jew thinks about it, like Avraham, that was what made him from Noach, from a Ben Noach into a Jew, was his ability to mimic the Creator so well that it's like he's creating a new world from this point on. That's really what differentiates between souls. That if you have a soul of a non-Jew and a soul of a Jew, the big difference is how far back can you go? Can you have faith that creates an entirely new world, or is your faith just enough to allow you to continue a little bit more on the path that you're going, just saying that, okay, whatever happened until now was necessary. It's part of, I have to learn from the circumstances what I'm supposed to do in the next moment. But a Jewish soul has the ability to come and say, forget about it, and it doesn't matter what happened. The circumstances are irrelevant.
Is that Atchala Riba you're talking about?
So the Chatchila Riba is like the,
That-
right.
How do you know that you've succeeded in doing this?
How do you know that you've succeeded? Wow. I don't know. I have to think about that. I have to think if there's a clear sign. Okay. I'll maybe as we talk, it'll come out. So here he says, the believer is able to be sincere with Avaya, your God. To be tamim tiyei Hashem Elokecha. So we'll see later on that tmimut really is related to what we call passive confidence. Tmimut. It means sincerity. Be sincere with Hashem. Or earnest. Or a lot of people like to translate it. And to be tamim means to be passively confident in Hashem. Right. But when the pasuk says Tamim tiyei Hashem Elokecha, so Rashi says, and I believe it's not quoted here. Oh, it is. And as Rashi explains, this means that you should what? Walk earnestly with him, yitalech imo b'tmimut, and await him. Do not study the future. Meaning, don't have worries, unnecessary worries. Lachkor achar atidot. It's very interesting. Today, nobody even. Well, there are futurists. There are some people who worry about the future. But in general, what do they do in the university? They worry about the past. That's even worse than worrying about the future. Because worrying about the past
You
is.
don't know the past, you don't know where you're going.
So that's exactly the Noachide type of faith, which says that the circumstances in which I find myself now are a sign for what's going to come next, or for what I need to do next. And it's okay. That's called minor faith. It's called smaller faith, and it's a thing. It's not an invention. Noach had this type of faith. Chanoch had this type of faith, and that's how they walked with Hashem. But the Chiddush of Avraham is that he doesn't think that the circumstances until this point have anything to do with the future. And how does he come to that? How does he come to that state of mind? By not thinking about the future. This is what faith really means. To be able to walk with Hashem the way that Avram did requires a person to not think about the future.
What about planning?
So that's a later stage.
Just like
There's a second stage. That's part of confidence already. But faith means, first and foremost, of course, you can't just. We're not going to leave you wallowing in the state of a vacuum, because obviously that's not going to work. But the importance of doing that at a stage is missed. People don't know how important it is to do that. to spend time in a state where I have no plans, and I'm not worried about the future because the future is good, because Hashem's good. That's it. That's how it is.
Is that the stage of Radlo in the song?
The what?
The stage of Radlo in the
Yeah,
song?
the Radla. That's what faith is.
So is that related to your Shashurim?
Oh, good question.
What was the question?
If it's related to Shashuim, so Shashuim is the first thing that comes out of that state.
Can you translate for me, please?
We talked for a few classes about delight, about I guess that's the word we took in the end, and we said that it's like a state in where there are letters, but there's no words. You have to form the words. You can create whatever you want. So obviously, if you've created an empty space where you're going to create your life now, the first thing that happens after that is a sense of, well, it's open-ended. You know, you can put the blocks together however you want them. Children are supposedly not supposed to be afraid of that, of tearing down everything they did and being willing to start over.
So the process of
And adults are really afraid of it because, you know, but I've achieved so much already. Why don't you
Children
dare
love it.
don't you dare touch my sandcastle? Don't touch my Lego, whatever it is, don't touch it. But supposedly a child is supposed to be able to tear it down. And by the way, that's one of the joys that has to be taught, which is how to tear down what you created. Not because we're into tearing things down, but to enjoy the opportunity to make something new out of it. So it's not the joy of tearing it. Tearing it down is maybe not a positive. You take it apart slowly.
Is this what they say? You're not allowed to force the Gula to come, therefore not to come and live in Israel. Some of the things is not connected.
Who says that?
A lot of
I
Haredi people.
don't know. I have to think
They
about
don't live
it.
there.
Can I just answer, the beginning of any creative process, whatever it is, or any problem solutionizing, emotional, psychological, practical, can only begin in a stage of nothingness.
Right.
We
It's
have-
the how does a goy say this? It's very interesting. I just saw this quote from a painter friend of mine, Yaakov Abergil. So he wrote that Van Gogh wrote that all the artists fear an empty canvas. He said, and it should be the other way around, that the empty canvas should fear the artist. So when you talk about fear, that's Noach. That's exactly Noach. Noach walked with Hashem because he was afraid. He was afraid of Hashem. What level of fear? Was it fear of punishment? Was it fear of Hashem's greatness? Whatever it is. And what does it mean that the canvas should be afraid of the artist? Because the artist is a great person. And he's going to create something that you never thought you could carry on you. Again, the canvas being like the world. How could I ever hold something so great up? Right? It's like an atlas who has to hold the whole world up on his shoulders. But that's how the non-Jew thinks about it. But here it's based on love. It's something completely different. Avram's greatness was that I could stay here forever. I love the empty canvas. I don't fear it. I love it. And the empty canvas loves me because I love it. And we could stay this way forever. I could stay in the state of there's only Hashem and Hashem is good forever. That's it. It's fine. What was that? That was like the neshama before he came into the world. There was no plans. There was nowhere to go. There was nothing to achieve. And you were in Hashem and it was all good. It was fine. There's no world.
But that's not doing what you're supposed to do here.
Because the neshama before it comes down into the world is not mission oriented. Okay?
But
It's
Jews
just it
are-
is. It is what it is.
The Jews are human doings, not human beings.
Good. Right? The being was before I came into the world. The moment I came into the world, that's a different story altogether. So because it's love, I can stay there forever. I can stay in the state of purging everything from my mind forever.
Oh, that doesn't mean you're not doing things. It means you're staying in a state of purging.
That I love that empty state because it's not really empty. It's being with Hashem's goodness. That's what it means.
And what was Noah afraid of?
Noach did things, or he had faith, he was willing to purge to some extent because of his fear of Hashem, his awe of Hashem. It's a different thing. It's like saying, how could you leave this, it's like Van Gogh saying, the regular artist is afraid of an empty canvas.
It's like
Why are you afraid? Because what does it tell you?
Fear and awe is paralyzing.
Again, why is it paralyzing? What's wrong with an empty canvas? Because that's not good. You have to. You have this fear. What if life goes unfulfilled? What happens if I don't do it? It's a fear. It's a fear of not doing what I'm supposed to do. It's a fear of not expressing myself, and so on. Because in the end, and this is very important, that he's not getting into this here, obviously, but you can develop it because it's written a little bit later, or at least we talked about it yesterday in some context, not with you. That fear creates separateness, separation. So when you look at the empty canvas, what is it telling you? It is telling you, well, what are you going to do about it? As if you have to do something, as if it's a reflection on you, as something. What do you mean? When it's out of love, so the empty state is the natural state. I'm not separate from Hashem. If Hashem is happy with a vacuum, I'm happy with a vacuum. That's it. There's no separation between us. The empty canvas, the empty world, the empty state is not telling me, oh, you have to express yourself. I don't have to express myself. Because if this is what Hashem is, it's fine. I'm with Hashem. I and Hashem are the same thing. So it doesn't really matter if I express myself, don't express myself. I'm not seeking my aggrandizement. I'm not seeking to be something. That's why I call this hachna in the end. It's a submission. It's not submission in the sense of being lowly, necessarily. It's submission in the sense of being one with Hashem. What's good for him is good for me. That's it. It's fine. I'm not looking to do anything here. And I'm not afraid to stay in that state. Of course, you shouldn't stay in that state too long.
Right. That's not Jewish.
Because Hashem also says in the end that he created a vacuum and then he drew a line of his infinite light into it and began to create worlds. And so since we mimic him, so we also do that.
We say Hamaisu Hu Ha'ikar, so
Again, in the end, when you came to this world, it was in order to create these worlds. But there's Ikar and there's Tafel. There is Tafel. There is something that's not the main thing. And you need that also. In the reality as it is now, he'll say this later, the moments of Emunah are relatively few and far in between. And most of life needs to be dedicated to confidence, to action. But you can't do the action properly, which is the Ikar, if you don't do the Emunah properly. And that's what's missing usually from the picture of life.
And is Chokhmah, the such of nothingness of Chokhmah, the channel to bring that nothingness? It's Bitul. Chokhmah is a place of Bitul.
But this is even more primary than Bitul.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. But
It's
there-
completely
no
empty.
access of-
Chokhmah is Bitul of the self in order to draw the line down, meaning to begin to do. That's why Chokhmah is the place where the light of the infinite begins to appear in everything. If you don't have Chokhmah, if you don't have Bitul, you can't really do. What you're doing is something else. You're taking care of your needs. But to perform your mission, you have to take from, okay, I have to say the geometry in order to for this to be understood. So, the big thing about Chassidus is that we looked at the Arizal, and when it said that the Arizal is not drawing a schematic of how the world was created. It's not like like a blueprint of a car. It's not how the engine works. It's not that when I draw a circle and I say that within the circle everything is empty, and then I draw a line that comes down and I say from here I begin to fill it up. I'm not saying that the Arizal didn't see glass blowers, but that's not what he meant. Okay? What does a glass blower do? He takes a lump of glass, and I don't know how they do it, but if somebody's ever blown glass,
They
there's
put it
something
on
you
a hollow
do.
tube and
Yeah.
they
And then eventually you begin to blow into it and it creates a vacuum. So you have this tube going into the lump, and again, it's more complex than that, but however they do it, and you begin to fill it up. So instead of filling it up with air, you say you fill it up with the worlds. And that hollow tube that goes into it, that's like the kav, the line that enters into the empty space. So I'm not saying he didn't see these things and it didn't matter to him, but when he drew the geometry, he was trying to make an impression on us that was much more abstract than some physical example. So when he draws a circle and he says, within the circle everything is a vacuum. That's what he says. In the beginning, Hashem created a vacuum. What was the vacuum like? It was equal on all sides. What did he purge seemingly from that vacuum? He purged all his previous thoughts. In other works that were published apart from Rav Chaim Vital, it says that vacuum was initially full of letters. So it's very close to how we feel, that before I begin faith, before I exercise faith, begin to create an empty space in my mind, in my psyche, I'm full of letters. My psyche is full of letters, all kinds of thoughts about this and about that, and how this works and how that works, and I'm full of it, as they say. And this I have to get rid of. So he gets rid of it, and now there's an equal space, meaning it's equal on all sides. So he says that's a circle. What does he want to say? He wants to tell me that the world is round? Wow, how did he know the world was round before there were spaceships? Before we had a satellite that could take a photograph of the Earth? Not very impressive, because the Greeks knew the world was round in 300 BC. And Chazal almost immediately adopted that point of view because it was so much more coherent than the Babylonian point of view where the world was flat. So in 300 BC, the whole world, most of the civilized world, knew that the world was round. They didn't think it was flat anymore. So that's not what the Ari is talking about. He's not telling me some great new piece of information about our planet. What he's trying to get across is that when you look from the inside, Hashem is infinite, or where Hashem receded to is into an infinite space. Why infinite? Because that's what the circle represents, a state of infinity. There's all kinds of understanding of what infinity means, right? Usually when people think of infinity, what's the first thing that we think of? I hope.
The sun.
Yeah.
I think of the symbol.
No, think of an infinity. A infinity that you know.
Cosmic.
Numbers.
Oh.
I hope that that's what everybody thinks of.
When I think of the cosmos.
What? Okay, same idea. Okay.
Let numbers over God. Don't think of God as infinite.
You don't know what God is. So how are you going to think of what infinity is if you don't have something that you have some relation to? Like we said here, I don't know Hashem's. I don't know what faith really means vis-a-vis Hashem in the beginning. I have to look at it relative to a tzaddik. I have to have some kind of point of reference. So my point of reference for infinity is numbers. So how do numbers, whenever we're in class, what is it? So you have a number line, and they tell you that it goes on forever. So the first inkling of infinity is a straight line that goes on forever, and then you're a little more complex. So you say, well, what if there were two straight lines, and they go on forever, and they're parallel, will they ever meet or not?
No.
And so somebody tells you, well, at infinity they might meet, because we don't know what happens at infinity. It might happen, it might not. We don't know. We don't know is the main thing. At infinity, I don't know what goes on. So I'm trying to envision the line. So what number is there at infinity? I don't know what its name is. There's a number there. There's a lot of numbers there.
Okay.
And I never know its name, because even if I tell you its name, There's right away one right after it. So infinity gives me a sense of I don't know, and it goes on forever. But that's a low level of infinity. Suddenly, when you get to second grade, or third grade, or fourth grade, wherever it is, they tell you, well, you know, the line doesn't just go in that direction. It actually goes in the opposite direction as well. And what do you put there? Negative numbers. So now it becomes really scary, because not only is it going that way forever, it's going that way forever also. So with the line, you suddenly have these two levels of infinity. You know, it goes just in one direction, another direction. Is it possible for me to get a higher level of infinity in my mind? Because I'm always looking for higher levels of infinity to begin to understand what it means that Hashem is infinite. So comes the Arizal and says, the best example that I can give you of something that's infinite is a circle. Why? Well, go in whichever direction you want. There's no beginning, no end. So it covers that part of it. I've been here again, you say, but even though I've been here again, think about numbers. In a certain sense, you've been through all the numbers. You just add one, so it looks like a number before. But the main thing is, it's not finite. Infinite means it's not finite in the sense of that I cannot tell you, I cannot get any bearings at all about where I am. There's no beginning and no end. So when I did two lines going in the one line extending in this direction and that direction, what I gained was that there's no beginning and no end. But now when I do the circle, I gain another level of infinity, which is that there's no beginning point at all. When I did the numbers, I start from 0. So 0 is the beginning point, and then they change. But when I do a circle, which point is 0? How can you tell me which point to begin with? And that's what we mean, really, when we say, says the Arizal, that Hashem receded, like he moved, he appears now as a circle. And what he wants to say is that there's no gradations, there's nothing to tell me where up is, and down is, and left is, and right. Rotated is however you want. You can't tell what the beginning or what the end is in any level. Whereas on a number line, you can still say something.
Not if it's negative.
Still, you have a 0. Otherwise, there's no meaning to the negative. If there's no 0, negative doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean 0 is the beginning.
It has to be, because otherwise, again, what do we say? 0 to infinity is all positive numbers. So it has a beginning, but it has no end. Now you're telling me, I want to also have no beginning, so let's go backwards also. It's fine, you can go backwards, but the backwards has no meaning as different from the front unless there is a point that's called 0, and then everything going in that direction is called negative. But on a circle, there is no such thing. There's no such point that from that point and on everything is positive, that point backwards everything is negative. There's no such point. So I've taken away even the definition of a starting point or a unique point, and all the points become equal. They're all the same. You can take any one of them, and it can be the beginning or the end. For that point on, call it positive. From that point backwards, call it negative. Doesn't matter, because you're not defining it in terms of positive or negative. Okay, there's a lot to be said of that, but that's a bit. From there, he brings a line down. Now, the line is already something finite. And he says specifically, the line that he's bringing down is not infinite. How is it not infinite? It's not infinite, first of all, because it's not theoretically infinite. We'll get to that later. Is it really infinite? If it was we will say something, because I said something about it. The line is your life, like the neshama coming down into the world. So is there an end point?
The good.
So you could say that going down is like into the body. But let's say the body was up here already. And now we start doing things, and we do, and we do, and we do. Is there an end point to what you can do?
No.
So I said, obviously in terms of life ends at some point. So that's not what I mean when I say is there an end point. What I mean to say is, do you actually finish anything? can you really finish anything that you do? And that's what I sort of started with. Meaning this expectation that I could finish something comes from the idea that somehow this line terminates at some point.
You gave the example of that bird who wants to reach the sun every
Yeah.
time, and he falls until he reaches and then he dies.
So that's the eagle, the famous medrash about the eagle. But is there a closure to anything? So it depends on how you look at it. If you think that the line is infinite, so no. How could it be infinite within a closed circle? Easily. How can a line be infinite? Because there's an infinite number of points on it. And you have to go through all of them. So even as much as you finish, there's still an infinite number in front of you. There's no end to it. So why do we call it finite? We call it finite because it doesn't connect to the bottom. This is
what?
to the bottom of the circle. It came out of the circle, and it stretches through the center point, but it cannot reach all the way down to the bottom no matter what it tries.
How do we know it reaches the center point? Does it stop before that?
Oh, it could stop before that. But even if it would extend as far down as it wanted to, it doesn't reach the final point. If it would make something very important happen. It would make there be a differentiation about some point. It would make some point different
I don't get
from
the
all
point.
the others.
I don't get the point.
Here.
I get the point,
right.
but you're making it up.
Yeah.
I mean, who says the line doesn't reach the circle? You see it go right to it.
The Rizal says.
But
So the line's coming down.
So where
Otherwise,
does it go
the
into the
circle is not
void?
infinite.
How does it go into the circle? The curve is coming down.
It comes
Oh.
down, but it can never reach the
What about
bottom
the
point.
point that it
Inside
comes
the
down
circle
from?
already?
Dean is
What?
asking.
Is it inside the circle already?
Yeah, the moment that it begins to this is confidence. This is faith.
Yeah, so what about the starting point?
Oh, we'll get to that in a second.
oh, that's where it came from.
But I'm talking first about whether it can reach all the way down. It cannot reach all the way down because the meaning of that would be
The Google is showing.
that there's here some unique point, which is where I wanted to get. This point becomes unique on the circle. No longer are all the points on the circle equal.
The starting point is also.
But then you say, but wait a minute. But the starting point was also unique.
No, it's
You
not
need
the
a
way
gap.
up.
No, why not? The point where I started from was also unique. Because that's where I started from.
Yeah.
So right away that took away from the circle being infinite. Because it's no longer infinite. There's
Okay.
one point on it that's unique. So what do you have to say about this? The starting point of the circle?
Came from above.
It's not on the. It's not.
not
Sorry,
on
on the
the
line.
circle.
It's not on the circle.
Right, the starting point
Where
is
is
not
it?
part of the
Oh,
circle.
need a
there's a skip. There has to be an empty space between the beginning of the line and the circle itself.
Really?
It doesn't really start from the circle. That's what you have to be very medayik. That's what Chassidus does. Be very medayik in what he says, meaning you have to be very extra careful in his words, and understand that if there was a connection above also, then the circle would no longer be infinite. So what? So Hashem wouldn't be infinite anymore. That's called that if I knew him, to know him would mean to connect to where my starting point was. If I knew him, I would be him. And in Chassidus, the idea is yes, you can know him, or at least you should strive to know him. Even if you can't fully, you should at least strive to. But know in the end that it doesn't really touch above either.
Where is this
To be
line?
able to, and now the main point here. I hope this is not too much.
I
Just too much,
lost
but every time that we do something in the world, every time that we act, it's first of all we have to follow this mechanism or this
Diagram.
not diagram, but like the
Concept.
it's like a recipe. Okay, the recipe is you first of all have to have a void, and the void means that there's only Hashem. Hashem is infinite and He's good, and that's it. And now I want to do something in the world. To do something in the world means to draw a line into that vacuum, to decide to do something. But the beginning of the line is the hardest point to do, because it doesn't stem directly out of the circle that I created. It doesn't come out of the vacuum. There was a whole Rebbe Morash was the one who dedicated the most to it. The question of, if Hashem wanted there to be a line, so why, when he created the vacuum, why didn't he just leave a line of letters trailing behind him and there would be a line? Why do you have to first vacate everything and then draw the line down?
This would be too much revelation of godliness, and we wouldn't have free choice. I learned that at 770.
Okay, so that's the, call it the stage one answer. The deeper answer is that any line like that would still be divine, like you said, and it would not be a mission that I'm performing. But, and this is the main thing, that there has to be a gap. This line is not connected above. If you said it was connected above, you're right. So you could just leave it, and it would connect above. It would connect here. But if it doesn't fully connect above, then imagine that I would leave this line and would be floating around. What would happen to it very quickly? It would lose all direction. It wouldn't be a line coming down. Imagine if I left a stick.
So how do you, if it's not connected?
Oh, so it's up to me to create a line. This is what I do. The human being, the soul, is what creates this line. But the chap here is, and the most difficult part of this whole recipe is, that the line doesn't extract directly from the circle. There's a little gap in the beginning. That little gap is where you need the most confidence. It's like you have to jump over. It's a leap of faith. It's not just, there's a meaning of faith, which means to empty everything. But there's faith, which is already confidence, which means that I have enough confidence to undertake something new and to make that leap. Because there's a little gap here. And that gap I have to get over. Okay? You know this? I have to have a tremendous amount of willingness to take a risk to come into this world. To do anything in the world. What?
Literally a leap of faith.
Ken, it's a leap of faith. Because I'm coming from the faith and leaping into the world. And it's a tiny gap. But it doesn't matter that it's tiny. As far as I'm concerned, it's infinite, because I'm going from the infinite to the finite.
Well, everybody who does inner work knows it's infinite and gap,
Okay.
and it's high, it's wide.
It's really wide.
So how do you keep it lined up with the line of God?
Oh, so that's exactly the point. That it doesn't exist before. You bring it out. So of course you bring it out from wherever in faith you are.
Sure.
You bring it from wherever you are. It doesn't matter where you are. One person, this is me,
Yeah, but there's the line of God.
and there's some other person who's
Is there a line
living
above?
from
She's
here.
talking about a line above. Is there
There's
a line?
somebody else living in this
Is
direction.
there a line above?
Yeah, okay.
And there's an infinite number of these lines coming in. We only get one example. Here's one example. You're smart enough, you understand. Every soul is a line coming out of the infinite and entering into the world from a different direction. How many end games are there?
Infinite.
Infinite. What is Geula? I don't know. I have my picture. You have your picture. The other guy has his picture. Is there a picture that includes all of them? Yes. What's the picture that includes all of them? The circle itself. If you can go back to understanding what the infinite was, now you can understand what Geula. That's why. What do we say about Geula? So in Chabad, it's the clearest. It says, "What is Geula?" It's the revelation of the circle. It says suddenly, when every person reaches, again, he can't completely touch the circle on the other side, but he comes as close to it as he can, and then suddenly, from all these lines that have finished their work, you suddenly see the silhouette of the circle.
It's really a black, like a colored circle.
It's
No, solid.
it's not the solid itself.
It's not lines, it's just solid. at that
It becomes solid at that point, right? But it's not a solid black line. It's like what's
Multicolored.
missing from the end of everybody's life. It's like this is missing from my life. This is missing from your life, and so on. It keeps going around and around and around and
Why
around.
would it be what's missing?
And
Why
it
wouldn't be
and
what's
suddenly everybody understands this is what it is. It's what's missing. It's not what you can see. It's what you can't see. It's what you haven't completed. In that sense, the Geula is what's not completed yet. That's why the
Because
sages
we have
say,
things we
"Ein
can
lo
see,
ra'ata
we
zulatcha
don't.
Elokim." Only your eye, Hashem, can see what it is. Not only because you need a million eyes in order to see the silhouette of this thing around all our lines, this circle around all our lines, but also because it's that part of you that you can't complete, that you're always trying to get to. You're always trying, and then suddenly that's revealed. The fact that life is unfulfilled should not be such a big fear. It's exactly what it needs to be. It has to be unfulfilled because you can't come to the other side because then the circle would suddenly be revealed to you. It wouldn't be infinite anymore. It would be
On the other hand.
to say it another way, you would be the Mashiach. You would decide where the Geula is. But every person has a spark of Mashiach, meaning every person has to draw the line as far out as they can until they almost reach, or mamish reach, ad v'lo ad bichlal it's called, until asymptotic. You never touch it actually, but you come as close as infinitesimally close to that end that you're looking for.
I didn't understand one leap that you made.
So
Why-
the Rebbe,
why-
oh,
Sorry,
okay.
you want to say, Kamari?
I just the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I mean, he did so much, right? And he kind of felt like it's all done. Like he kind of said to everybody, it's all done. Just like we're ready, because that's how he felt about his own journey. No, that
Well, maybe he had the picture of the
He had
circle.
he right.
And you said you're all so close to the end. You don't understand. It's just
Mhm.
it's just want the end to appear. If you just want it to appear, maybe it'll appear. And each person the end that he wants, and then suddenly out of all of them together, you suddenly realize what the circle is. And the revelation of the Mashiach or the Geula is the revelation of the circle. Where did we all come from? Where are we all going? But then say the prophets, don't be so you want it to come. You don't know what you're asking for.
Yeah.
Because the journey will be over in that sense. You really want the journey to be over? No. So if you're smart, you understand that really there's an infinite number of lines, possible lines here. And so instead of one journey will be over, we'll start a different one. So that's not the reason.
We want partial Geulas.
Right, that's the problem.
Partial.
Partial.
Oh.
That everybody wants only a piece of the Geula. I want the whole
piece.
thing. Again, their piece. Yeah.
How do you know that each person's either contribution or what he didn't finish? How do you know that it's what he didn't do as opposed to what he did do? How do you know that?
There has
That's,
to be
that's
stuff
where he
he did.
hasn't reached the end.
But there has to be stuff he does.
If he
do.
would be able to reach the end, I would see.
No, but there's
Hashem
the
again.
Kav, the soul enters the realm. That's his Kav. And so it doesn't reach the final point, but
Right.
maybe someone else's line will. But
But it can't be on the same. Somebody else's line is at a different angle.
Lines
so,
don't
but
intersect.
what he did contribute is his Kav. Is that correct?
Okay.
And that he reaches a point that's not to the end, and someone else comes his way. It's not to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that there'll be like a
Silhouette around all the lines.
I see.
Isn't there
But
something
who said it's
about
going to be even? Like
Yeah.
each person will be like it might be like a jagged edge in the inner part of the silhouette.
It's always even.
Wow, how do you know that?
So, that we'll talk about later. But every person goes through in life through everything that they need to go through. And everybody comes to the final resting place is the same.
Do Gilgul
The-
continue each other's lines, or?
Yes, but not necessarily in the sense that the line was cut short, but rather
Please say that again.
it's not necessarily that the line was cut short and you continue from where it was.
So what?
be a replay of the
It,
same
it,
thing.
it has to go through a lot of the same.
Like a new baby being born.
No, but that's exactly what we said, that
Yeah.
to start something new, there's a gap always. Even if you're going to trace the same line.
There are more gaps.
So to trace the same line, you also have to go through the whole process from the beginning, but with the gap that you can't remember where you came from. That's the Baal Shem Tov Shita. That's his diuk on why he doesn't like Gilgulim, part of it.
So there's a gap at the beginning and at the end.
Right. Let me give an example of the gap. So just so we'll finish with this. This line, where does the line appear in Tanakh? The most famous line in Tanakh, I think, the most famous is Rachav's, the woman from Jericho.
That's right.
And we'll learn about it later and much more in depth. And the Jewish people are coming. They're going to conquer the land. And she heard about it 40 years ago. She tells them, we heard that Hashem took you out of Egypt and he parted the sea for you and he gave you the Torah. And we know this is all true. And everybody's been, shaking in their, since this happened. And we knew this day was going to come. What's her personal take from all of that? What was her personal take? What was her conclusion about her life? She was 52 then. She was 12 when they came out of Mitzrayim. She's 52 now. What did she think she needs to do?
Become Jewish.
She knew she needed to convert. But did she?
Yes.
She married Yoshua.
She couldn't.
No?
She was unwilling to start a new line.
Mm-hmm.
So what did she do? She put a line. She put a thread, the red thread outside, and that thread is a thread of hope that what? That somehow I'll survive the way that I am. That's what the symbolism means. Think about, what is she saying? She's saying, I saved you guys, so you owe me. Owe me what? Allow me to continue to be the non-Jew that I am with the family that I have, and leave me alone. And what's my symbol for that? A red tikvat chut hashani, and it's called tikva, hope that this line will continue as I am. Why is that crazy? Because where did she live? On the wall. What did they tell her is going to happen? The walls are going to come crumbling down. So the Rebbe Rayatz, not just him, everybody learns this way in the Gemara. It's called Tikvat Chut Hashani because it's a crazy hope. Doesn't make any sense. But not to start something new, people will hang on to a thread. They'll do anything they can not to start a new line. They'll do anything they can not to go through that leap of faith that you have to go through in order to start something new. They'll just do anything, including try to hang their whole family on a little thread on a wall that's about to come crumbling down, and somehow everybody's supposed to recognize that this is the family that was in that house. What are you talking about?
But it worked.
It worked. Did it work?
And when did she decide to
What
convert?
did it work?
She converted.
I don't know. Did
So
it?
I don't think
It
it
would,
worked.
but obviously it would.
I don't think it worked
Why?
because she converted.
She married
So
Yoshua.
she
So
did
it's
plan
plan
B.
B. What point?
So she did too.
And that's how we go through life.
We should go to Plan B. Plan A.
Plan B is Plan A. That's the idea. But to understand that, you have to do faith, because what faith does is it gives you the background, the necessary step before drawing the line. It allows you to create a vacuum. Don't be afraid of the vacuum. You're going to jump into. You're jumping into a vacuum. What's in the vacuum? So in the beginning, when the person says, jump into an empty pool, what are you, crazy? I don't want to die. But if you understand that the pool is not empty, it's Hashem, and it's good. Hashem is all good. It'll be okay. Then maybe you'll jump. But the jumping is still a jump. It's called jumping into Gula. You have to make a leap. It's not going to work any other way. And I'm not saying we did this when we were 4 years old, because we don't remember what we did when we were 4, and we don't remember what we did when we were born, and we don't remember any of these things. We said it starts today. So today I have to learn how to create this vacuum in order to purge all my negative thoughts. This we'll learn about next time. And to only feel Hashem is good. And from there I can begin to draw a new line. Every day is a new line. It's a new reality.
Every day.
Every single day, and sometimes it's many times a day, depending on who the person is. There are people who have to restart 10 times a day. Reb Nachman used to restart 50 times a day. Every single day. That's how he lived. Crazy life. And he learned how to live with it. Because he wasn't drawing, and now you can understand what a tzaddik is. He's like a guy who's not drawing. Tzaddik is a kav. Tzaddik yasod olam. He's a kav. Every Jew is a kav. Every Jew is a tzaddik. So Reb Nachman lived through, who knows, 500 lifetimes in his life. Because he was 500 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people. I don't know how many people he is. How many lines is he drawing through this vacuum, through this space that Hashem created called the world? You have to understand, every day is a lifetime if you start again.
For every moment.
And every moment can be. And you know what? It doesn't matter. That somebody asked before. He asked, "How do I know that the lines are even? Maybe they don't come to the same." No.
Right.
Every time you start a new line, the previous one is complete. By definition. By definition.
That's just a leap of faith, I believe that.
No. We'll talk about it. We'll explain why. But every time that sometimes you're forced, and sometimes you can do it because you choose to. But there's always a leap of faith at the beginning, which is the hardest thing to do, and a Chav couldn't do it. In the beginning, what she wanted was just, and the Rebbe Rayatz calls it that the drowning person will hang on to a piece of straw. Straw is nothing you can hang on to. You can't support your weight. It's not gonna. But what he means is that you'll do anything except need to recreate yourself. The drowning person means even if you're drowning, not because you're drowning. Even if you're drowning, you'd rather try to hang on to the proverbial straw than reinvent yourself. Because that's how the human nature is. I want to continue the line I've already been on. This one I know. The next one will require another leap of faith. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to go through that. So what's the remedy? The remedy is that you have to have moments in this world of having faith. And faith means recreating the circle, going back into the state that everything is empty, you're resetting everything, and from there it comes out much more naturally. You still have to make a leap, it's still difficult, you need a lot of confidence to do it, but it's starting from a good point. Meaning you're not hanging on to the thread, you're rather saying, thread's gone, all the thoughts are gone, it's all gone, it's not here. I'm purging my mind of all these threads that I had. And this is especially true in the person's psychology about all these, I had all these plans and it's supposed to be. What do you know? Let it go.
Do you think for most people they need to leave their life a little bit, even if it's a day or two, to accomplish things?
You do, but you have to know what you're doing. Just to go on vacation to the Bahamas is not going to help.
Once you've learned this.
Once you've learned this, so you can do it anywhere.
Do you think though most people would have to step out of their, that makes sense to me.
Maybe. Okay.
So